Hello viewer, the Nameless Scholar here. Once a defiant faction who struggled for its right to live, the Imperium of Man has turned into a boring, poorly written mess that is not stagnating, but clearly ascending, thus missing the entire point. I hate the modern Imperium more than any other faction in modern 40k. For the modern Imperium is everything that is wrong with modern 40k personified. The Imperium is currently only good due to its foundation with the old lore. Without the old lore, the Imperium of Man is the most boring, uninteresting, cookie-cutter human faction in all of sci-fi, to the point I'd much rather read the Zeely sequence. Before I begin, I want to say that I will not be talking about the Primaris, at least in detail. They have been covered to death and then some. Not only that, if I did cover the Primaris, this video would be at least an hour long. It is common knowledge at this point for why they are badly written. However, what I will say is that I believe the Primaris is one of the biggest thinly veiled attempts at turning Warhammer 40k into Age of Sigmar in space. If anything, the Primaris are sci-fi Stormcast Eternals, not the other way around. Even if the Stormcast playstyle is much closer to the Custodes. I will not be talking about Matt Ward and what he has done to the Ultramarines. It's an even deader horse than the Primaris. Unlike CS Goto and the Eldar, Ward's damage can be mostly ignored except for the Grey Knights. Before I rip into the Imperium's factions, I want to talk about the general gripes I have. Firstly, the fact that GW will not do anything productive and creative with the Milky Way galaxy, which has 8 trillion planets. Everything takes place on the same planets. They managed to condense that entire galaxy into 8 guys in a brawl. This is just a lamer version of pro wrestling. The Imperium was originally meant to be the Empire of Man in space, with the twist that whereas the Empire was the Holy Roman Empire, the Imperium was the Catholic Church itself. Now that's gone, and all we have is a generic human faction with Grandpa Smurf essentially being Lord Regent. As I have stated in my videos before, the Imperium is no longer stagnating. It is progressing. And progress is antithetical to what 40k is, both in the political and the historical sense. The whole point of 40k was that so much has been forgotten and humanity has fallen into superstition. Without this, the Imperium can work, but it loses its soul and becomes one of the most bland, boring, uninspired factions in all of sci-fi, next to the Brotherhood of Steel from Fallout, which literally goes against the whole point of the Imperium and the previous lore, where the Imperium refused to go quietly into the night as the enemies of man were close to outnumber them. Now, every Imperial citizen and guardsman know who the Chaos Space Marines, the traitor Primarchs are, and what the demons are, which also goes against what the Imperium originally was. I will come back to this later. The Imperium has always had plot armor, but the amount that it has reached is simply ridiculous. Cadia fell and GW introduced Vigilus, which is just Cadia 2. Not only that, nothing becomes of anything just to artificially keep the Imperium alive. Because the logical conclusions in the modern lore would be that it has to be the end times. Even with the return of the Primarchs, the Imperium should be actively getting decimated on all fronts by Chaos, Necrons, and Tyranids. I'll come back to this later as well. Speaking of the Loyalist Primarchs, they should have never returned. A part of the tragedy was that they had become the stuff of legends and myths long forgotten, that they might as well be alone against the traitor Primarchs who are still active. The Primarchs were a relic of a bygone era. I want to start off with the Space Marine chapters and go over them one by one, like I did with the Traitor Legions. However, because unlike GW, I know that the Imperium doesn't comprise entirely of Space Marines, so I will be short and to the point and oftentimes will refer to other videos done by other content creators to save time. The Dark Angels. I used to like the Dark Angels, and to a point I still do. The tragedy that once knight-like superhumans who go out of their way to hide their greatest secret, even killing Inquisitors to hide it. On the other hand, you have Lionel Johnson, an overglorified, arrogant man-child who gets favoritism from Black Library authors. For example, like how he was incorruptible while Fulgrim wasn't, how he practically has spider senses, so on and so on. The White Scars. Once rather uninteresting and neglected, the White Scars became one of the best written Loyalist legions and chapters in all of Warhammer 40k. Even this, however, does have its downsides. Jagatai Khan has been elevated, but it happened at the expense of Mortarion, turning him into a whiny man-child, as if we didn't have Perturaba already. I just wish that all of the Loyalist legions were written as well as the White Scars are. The Space Wolves. I am not even going to get into them. There's a reason why the Space Wolves are one of the most despised factions in all of 40k. All I will say is that the Space Wolves, despite having an identity crisis ever since 5th edition, are, for some reason, one of the favorite factions by Black Library. Not only that, there is the issue of Leman Russ. I hate Leman Russ. He is the epitome of lawful stupid, and for some reason he's one of the most favored Primarchs, even though he's one of the worst, if not the worst, witching character in all of 40k. Check out this video by the Outer Circle if you want details. If I got into detail with the Primaris and this video would be at least 1.5 hours long. The Imperial Fists. The Imperial Fists are fine, just fine. I like Rogel Dorn as a character, even if that character is essentially a wall of bricks. My only gripe is that Rogel is one of the more favorite Primarchs, and his elevation oftentimes comes with the expense of Perturabo. Besides, I don't have a problem with the Imperial Fists, aside from them doing a lot of things single-handedly without any support during the siege, whereas Perturabo just had to deal with a bunch of idiots and turn them into devastating war assets during the siege. Who I really do have a problem is with the Black Templars. The Black Templars are the death corpse of Krieg of the Space Marines. An interesting concept ruined by tourists who want to LARP as Wehrmacht soldiers in power armor. Unlike the Death Corps, however, the Black Templars can still have their moments. The Blood Angels. The Blood Angels are an interesting case. I think the Primaris did them particularly dirty, as Gary Sturius Call just came to Dante and said, "I found a way to cure the Red First Lamau," making Primaris gene seed much more stable, even though the whole damn point of the Blood Angels was that they were nobles hiding a terrible secret that turned them into bloodthirsty savages, and they were struggling against an illness that was always present, that never went away, but would struggle against it regardless. So the entire point of the Blood Angels was butchered with the introduction of Primaris. And yet another problem I have with the Lion being incorruptible is it takes away from what the Blood Angels are. A legion that despises chaos so much, there is not one recorded instance of them falling to the ruinous powers. Lion being incorruptible takes away from Sanguinius and his sons being the only, actually almost perfect legion. They were the exception, not the rule. All armies in Warhammer 40k are equal. Some armies are more equal than others. The Space Marines are the most equal army of them all. However, the Iron Hands is the exception to this rule. The Iron Hands are the most neglected faction in all of the Loyalist Space Marines, even in the Horus Heresy. Since they are so neglected, people don't care about them, including me. They are so boring. However, they aren't the most neglected Space Marine faction, however. That goes to the Death Watch, which is the least played faction in the entire game. The Death Watch were especially done dirty around 8th edition, when they retconned the Death Watch from originally being a penance legion for the Space Marines, who were originally from the Traitor Legions and survived the Horus Heresy in the side of the Loyalists. For all we know now, those Traitor Legionnaires, with no exceptions, were executed. Every single one. How do I know this? Because that was the fate of the Eisenstein crew that were on Luna. You know, the same Space Marines who helped the remaining Loyalists evacuate from Istvan 5. The Ultramarines. The Ultramarines, from the mess-ups of our spiritual liege to them becoming the poster boys, are everything wrong with the Imperium. because with a few exceptions, everybody, and I do mean everybody, acts like they are Ultramarines. The most boring and generic of them all. Marnius Calgar was never an interesting character either, by the way. If you went to GW and said, okay, you can retcon literally every Space Marine chapter, aside from the Ultramarines and Black Legion, and you will be able to get away with it, they would do it in a heartbeat. I believe Games Workshop deep down regrets making up that many Space Marine legions. And as for the Salamanders and the Raven Guard, I don't have a lot to say. Aside from the former's fanbase is comprised of memeing tourists who are either wholesome Primarch, lol dead Eldar, or people who are fully aware that Vulcan is a self-righteous psychopath, but still like his idealism. Meanwhile, the Grey Knights... oh boy. Their lore is as stupid as modern Eldar lore, but for different reasons. The sheer amount of moments that don't fit 40k are present, such as Khaldor Drago becoming a Deus Ex Machina tool, and him carving Mortarian's name to the Primarch's heart. Yeah, that's the thing, read lore. They can also freely roam the warp alongside other chicanery that involves Khaldor Drago. Not only that, in the modern lore, practically everyone knows who the Grey Knights are, literally throwing their entire point and purpose out the window. What happened to the one unbreakable shield against the coming darkness? One last blade forged in defiance of fate. Let them be my legacy to the galaxy I conquered, and my final gift to the species I failed, quote, huh? The Imperial Guard. What they desperately want to do with the Ultramarines, they have succeeded with the Imperial Guard. Most of the original sub-factions of the Guard don't have models anymore. You have to use Krieg models for Armageddon, for example. There's Catachan and the Attilan Rough Riders, but aside from that, everybody are either Cadian Shock Troops or Death Corps of Krieg, who I am not saying are no-no Germany. I am saying that its fanbase has been hijacked by tourists who think that Krieg are no-no Germany, who want the Larpez Wehrmacht soldiers in flak armor. Things like the Gaunt's Ghosts are the exception to the rule. Also, the Catachan Jungle Fighters are just kind of flair. So, with the scrapping of most Imperial Guard regiments such as the Mordian Iron Guard, Valhalla Ice Warriors, the Praetorians, the Elysium Drop Troops, and the Talon Desert Raiders, the Imperial Guard are now just a lamer version of the mobile infantry of Starship Troopers, so what's the point? The Adeptus Mechanicus. Belisarius Call's lore and its consequences has been a disaster for Warhammer 40k lore. From him being a Gary Stew to the horrible lore of the Primaris. Not only that, Call has damaged the Mechanicum lore to a great degree. I'm sorry, no amount of political power is going to prevent some of the Mechanicum revolting against you because they think you are a tech heretic. I really don't have much to say about them because everything has been said. I can add nothing new to this conversation. The Sisters of Battle and the Inquisition. The Sisters of Battle and the Inquisition suffer from different things, yet I will put them in the same section of the video. The problem with these Sisters of Battle is that they are not well written, especially now. Acts of Faith is one of the most fundamentally misunderstood things in all of 40k, next to Slanesh. The authors just used faith as a crutch device for the Sisters of Battle to win wars they couldn't win or get out of situations they normally wouldn't be able to. To the point, some people think that Sisters of Battle are incorruptible. By the way, Muriel Sabathiel is still canon. Not only that, in Arcs of Omen, Angron through Khorne apparently manifested this curse, so it's not Khorne manifesting in real space and swinging his blade, and this curse essentially corrupted fleets of Primaris Salamanders and Sisters of Battle. So not even GW knows what the hell is going on at this point, because they are too busy turning Warhammer 40k into Age of Sigmar in space. The Inquisition, however, has its own issues. There are things like the Eisenhorn Omnibus, who portray the Inquisition well. However, due to memes, tourists, and writing, the Inquisition has become the worst written faction in all of 40k. An all-powerful, all-knowing organization with power that would make the Gestapo and the Thought Police blush, are depicted as incompetent idiots who send exterminatus at every planet the Imperium loses. When I first got into 40k, for me, the Inquisition was like the thought police. If you ever try to stray away from the Imperial Creed, the Ordo Hereticals will catch you when you least expect it, break you, and then shoot you in the head with a bolter after they made you confess to all your crimes and broke you in a final act of spite. For me, they were a ministry of love. But no, we don't get that. The fact that everyone knows who the Grey Knights are, who the Chaos Legions are, and what demons are, it literally eliminates the whole point of the Inquisition. So the modern lore has screwed over the Inquisition and made them even more pointless. If you want to know more, watch this video by Pancreas No Work. The Adeptus Custodes. I have refrained from talking about the Adeptus Custodes and saved them for last when it comes to factions-wise, because when I told some of my friends that if things did happen in modern lore, logically the Imperium would be getting decimated by Elfrons, by Chaos Necrons, and the Tyranids, while the Orcs and the Eldar do nothing, they tried objecting against me by pointing out the Custodes. Here's my problem with this take. For every planet a host of Custodians save, 5 others would be lost due to how few in numbers they are. I'm sorry, there is only so much an elite special forces can do before even they get overwhelmed by 3 different unending enemies. And because this is YouTube and 40k, I guess I have to talk about the recent incident, shall we say. We have always been at war with East Asia. Eurasia was always our ally. My take on this whole debacle is the same with my take on the Reflection Cracked. Just as the Reflection Cracked showed with how Fulgrim's character was assassinated, how Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League showed with how Batman was treated, and just like how Baldur's Gate 3 assassinated Viconia Devi's character, if a piece of media is showing something that contradicts previously established rules and something badly written is objectively correct, then you have every right to ignore it. The moment you violate the established rules of a universe, you send a clear message that the rules don't matter. If the rules don't matter, then consistency doesn't matter. If consistency doesn't matter, nothing matters. If nothing matters, there is no story. And if there is no story, then there is no point. In the case of 40k, if there is no consistent lore, there is no point in following or playing it, as people who only play the tabletop and don't care for the lore are the exceptions, not the rule. People mostly got into the tabletop, including me, due to the lore, and to claim otherwise is intellectual dishonesty. I will be talking about the importance of rules in a universe in a later video, hopefully. So that's about it for what I have to say for the Custodes. All that is need to be said is that rules of a universe has to be consistent and make sense in the context of that universe's established rules. Otherwise, one has a right to ignore it. I have mentioned a few things that the recent lore in the Horse Heresy that was absolutely awful, but that was on the traitor's end. But I will not ignore the things that have also been done to the loyalists that also butcher the lore. However, I will not be talking about the Urda situation, as it is also a dead horse. Thanks to the hack that is Aaron Dembski-Bowden, the Emperor went from a stern but socially maladjusted father with an idealistic yet ultimately unfitting vision of the galaxy to a petty tyrant who sees his sons as nothing but tools to be used, abused, and then thrown away like trash when they are no longer useful. Even though we had many years of established lore contradicting this, to the point where the older editions clearly state that the Emperor hesitated to kill Horus because he was the favorite son. The Emperor seeing Horus as a tool to be used and abused simply does not work. So instead they had to give Horus Chaos power-up like we're in a shonen now, and casually have him kill Sanguinius, and then the Emperor and Horus have a Dragon Ball tier duel with one another. Not only that, the final nail in the coffin was to give the Emperor a real name and to reveal his origin and completely destroy his character and any mystique that he ever had. They revealed that the Emperor is the Dark King, a primeval entity that existed even before the War in Heaven, and he is single-handedly responsible of the creation of chaos. It would be fine if it was a story of him undoing his mistake and failing, but then you realize that this is done in bad faith because the Emperor's new characterization as a petty tyrant. I would call him Sigmar, but worse, but no. At this point, he's just Ulrich, but worse. Not only are they doing this to turn Warhammer 40k into Age of Sigmar in space, they are also doing this to sell more loyalist Space Marines. That was always the point. For Games Workshop, short-term profit speaks louder than long-term sustainability. They want to sell Space Marines because it is what sells most. It is a very vicious cycle of supply and demand, which they want to perpetuate. They want to triple down on the notion that the Space Marines are player 1, the Imperium are player 2, Chaos is player 3, which can be played rarely, and everyone else don't get to play. For every Night Lord's Omnibus, for every Infinite and the Divine, there are 10 more stories about Loyalist Space Marines. If GW does not allow the expansions of other factions willingly, of course they will not sell. Look at the Craft Worlds, the Dark Eldar, and hell, at the time of recording, we are nearing the 2-year anniversary of the Leagues of Votann, and they still don't have a novel. So at this point, this is just Age of Sigmar, but worse. Age of Sigmar's sole focus are not the Stormcast Eternals, even if they are the post-children of AOS. GW tripling down on their focus on Space Marines is also present in how modern lore talk amongst fans go. It's usually about who will be the next returning Primarch is, especially done by a certain individual, however I will not give names. Not because I think they don't deserve any recognition, far from it. It is because I am not like another certain YouTuber who starts crap for the sake of publicity. I don't care enough to punch up or down. I only care about showing people how much of an opinionated jerk I am. With tooting my own horn out of the way, if I wanted Primarchs, I'd go play Horus Heresy. Speaking of, it really would have been better to see the galaxy burn in the flames of Horus's ambitions than to live to see what 40k has become today.